Hey, I'm Jeff and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to show you how to fix a stretched out leggy plant like this syngonium. I'm going to show you a couple different methods with examples, and then you can choose which one is best for you in your houseplants. This can be applied to many different types, including syngoniums, basically any philodendron, pothos, anthurium, aglaonemas, dieffenbachias. The list is huge. This one has lost all its lower leaves, and that's essentially my fault. I provided some inconsistent watering and it just basically dropped the lower leaves. So it looks really kind of goofy this way. So I'm gonna show you how to fix this and get it looking good again. So let's get started. The first method is to simply take your pruning shears like these and cut off the top of the plant. Whenever you remove the top portion, it stimulates growth lower in the stem, and sometimes you can get one or even multiple growth points, and that's what happened with this little guy right here. I cut off the top of these stems and it has started to push out. It looks like 1, 2, 3 growth points on this stem. And same with this one down here. It's got a growth point right there. It's got a new leaf. And the same thing with this Emerald Beauty. I cut off the stems and it looks like these nodes activated quite low in the soil line. So it's pushing out a number of growth points lower, but you can see there's a couple growth points here as well. I do have a few more examples to show you guys, but since this promoted growth lower in the pot, I'm actually going to snip off just the top of the last nodes just to see if I can promote further branching. Just like that. I'm just going to go along and just cut the tops off just so that it promotes growth at the kind of like the next closest node. I'm going to cut this one down a little bit further as well, just like that. These can be propagated in soil or perlite, whatever method that you want. So yeah, I'm going to see if this promotes further growth or further branching just by chopping it down a little bit more. But you can see this is the way the plant faces, and it just makes a nice full pot again compared to something like this one. This little Birds of Paradise was an experiment, as I have two, and I didn't know what to do with this one. My large one right here just pushed out a new leaf, so I really didn't need to. So I basically chopped off all of the leaves of this one. So you can see this is where I basically cut it down to a stump, and it pushed out this cool little leaf. So this plant, if you don't want it to be large, cut off all the leaves and it'll, I guess, regrow as a smaller plant. So I'm going to see how this one develops over time. The only thing you have to watch for when pruning these types of plants or leaves like this is there's kind of like a little pocket on the side. That's where a new leaf will emerge from. So as this one grows, there will be just a slight little bump along the stem. You can cut back the entire leaf, just don't cut that little I don't even know what to call it, basically like a little side growth or pocket. I'm going to use this alocasia as an example because it is putting out a new leaf. You can see this little pocket right here up to this point is how or where a new leaf develops. I can cut right here and cut off this entire leaf, and it's not going to affect the growth of this plant. So just watch for these areas on a Birds of Paradise or a plant like an alocasia. These can get quite stretched out as well, and you can cut it back completely. There's just many different ways to grow houseplants, and that's the nice thing about learning about them. Here's another example of a couple syngoniums, basically as a last-ditch effort. These are the Syngonium 3 Kings. Every time they'd put out one leaf, they would drop a leaf, and it got really stretched out. So I cut it back, and this one got one growth point right there. Maybe it looks like a very tiny one starting. This one here got 2 branches. So yeah, I'm just going to see how this one grows. But again, just cut it back and it will promote at least one growth point, if not multiple. You can do this with anthuriums as well. This Quermalens, it had a fairly long stem when I bought it, and every time it produced a new leaf, it would come out deformed. It just looked like a mangled mess like this one. So I did the same thing. I just cut the top off. So I snipped it right here, and it produced a growth point from a node, and now it's starting to push out an entirely new stem. I did propagate a couple of those cuttings in my perlite prop box. Here is the cutting. So I took a section of the stem. It does have a nice juicy root. It's produced a growth point from one of the nodes, and now it has the cutest little leaf. So yeah, not only can you control the size of a plant, but you can also make multiple plants from taking those stem cuttings as well. So I think you get the idea. Chop the top off and it promotes growth lower in the plant. I think the hardest part about this is actually making the cut. I know I was terrified, absolutely terrified that I was going to kill my houseplants when I pruned off or I cut the top off of a certain plant, especially when it's an expensive one. Like this one wasn't cheap, but I just wasn't happy with the overall results of it. So I took some drastic measures, and plants are more resilient than you think. Specifically with jade plants, you can cut all the leaves off, like all the stems, branches, and it will regrow. So plants are super resilient. They want to grow and thrive. So don't be scared to prune and propagate plants. And it's actually quite fun just learning how they grow. The second process is called air layering, and that's what I'm doing with this syngonium right here. The concept behind that is you want to grow roots while the plant is intact. This stem is intact. I placed a little soil pod right here. I'm growing roots. Now I can, hoping that there's roots in here, I can chop the top off and then I can plant it back in this soil. There should be no other propagation method. With the first type of just chopping off the top, you have to propagate it in either soil, water, or perlite, and then it has to go through that rooting process. This essentially skips that step and it roots it while it's still attached. So now I'm going to remove this little soil pod, and like I said, I hope there's roots on here. I've done air layering methods with different types of plants like philodendrons. I've even done it on some of my ficus plants. It's a nice method if you're worried about your cutting not getting roots if you put it in, say, like water or something like that. So it's actually quite satisfying to see roots growing in the container. Now, just by looking at it, I'm not seeing anything that would suggest roots. There's nothing popping out the bottom, but I'm hoping there's roots when I take it off. So let's dismantle it and see what we got. Okay, now the moment of truth. This has been rooting for a few weeks now. I'm just gonna take this off for a second. I'm just going to put it up here just so the cutting doesn't flop over and break as soon as I take the soil pod off. I just want to see if there's roots first. So I bought these little pods off Amazon. They come in different sizes, but you don't actually need anything like this. You can use just like a plastic Ziploc bag, just something to either hold in sphagnum moss or soil. I use soil with this one because I'm going to be potting it back into soil, so I don't have to do any sort of extra steps or anything like that. So it does have soil. So it has a little tab on the side. Just unclick it, and then you open it up, and there is roots. There is one big juicy root that I can see, and I'm gonna see if I can get this one off. And it looks like maybe another root starting at the back side here. So that worked out perfect. Now I'm going to take my pruning shears and cut in between two nodes. So this node right here produced roots, and then here's a node right below it. So I'm gonna cut in between there, just like this. Now I have my top cutting. Now the reason why I cut this top off is because I want to put it back on the plank. I'm going to place it lower in the pot, and as it grows up the plank, the concept is to get larger leaves. When syngoniums age and mature, they actually go from their arrowhead shaped leaf to more of a three-lobed leaf, and that's what's happening with this one. You can see they're starting to separate. So this syngonium is starting to mature, so I'm going to place it back in the pot, and hopefully I get larger, more mature leaves as this plant continues to grow up the plank. You can see they do latch onto the wood as they grow up a support system, and that's how you get larger, mature leaves on houseplants. One thing about the air layering process, regardless of which container that you use, whether it's this little pod or you use like a plastic bag, you just want to make sure that you don't let the growing medium dry out, whether that's sphagnum moss or soil. Yeah, you want it to be consistently wet, maybe not like sopping or like soggy, but you don't want to let it get completely dry. Another kind of cheap, easy way is to take a small little nursery pot like this. I cut out the bottom, and then I make a little cut along the side. This just allows me to fit it around the stem, and then I use a piece of tape just to kind of hold it together. It's tough doing it with one hand here. So you just place it together like that. Put your growing medium in there, again, whether that's sphagnum moss or soil, and then I just cover the top with a plastic bag just to hold in humidity. So this works perfect as well. I've done this in the past, and yeah, it's worked out just fine. I cut back the bare syngonium stem to about 2 or 3 nodes in the pot. It will branch out again, so it should get a growth point from this node and even maybe lower in the pot. And now I'm going to add this cutting back in the pot. So I'm just going to remove the plank here first, and then I'm going to remove this cutting from the soil, and then I'll pot them up together. I could dig just a small little kind of divot It's not a large root system, but I just want to check out these roots here first just to see what we're dealing with, and they look super healthy. So I'm not going to disturb this too much. You can see it's actually maybe a little bit root bound at the bottom here. So now because of that, I did remove a lot of the leaves. So I am going to remove some of these roots. I'm not going to do like a large root prune or anything. I'm just going to do just a little, just a teeny little root prune. I'm just going to cut these back, maybe something like that. I'm going to set these aside. I don't want them to rot in the pot. Okay, now all the soil is just falling off, and now I'm just inspecting just to make sure that there's no areas of any root rot. So everything looks really good. I'm going to put the plank back in the pot, and just to show you guys, if you have any concerns or any worry about like a plank rotting in the soil, this has probably been in here for over a year. This is pine. This is wood that you probably shouldn't use or get wet because it rots easy, but it's not rotten. It's maybe like a little bit stained, water stained, but it's not rotten. So I always put my planks in the pot. It's just much easier to move them around if you have it in the pot as opposed to outside. You have to find something to secure it with. It's not good. So I'm going to put this one back in the pot. Just going to shake off all the soil here. I'm going to put that right there. Actually, I might put a little bit of soil in the bottom here first. And I do have a little soil tray underneath the table here, so that's where I'm getting all of this soil. Just going to put a little bit of fresh stuff at the bottom. I should have brought it up here, but I'm just grabbing handfuls underneath the table here. And I'll put a little bit at the back here as well. And then I can put the cuttings in after. So I'm just going to pack that down. Now I'm going to add this one in just because it has a larger root system. I'm going to put it in the same orientation. I want these roots, maybe I have to take a little bit of soil out for this one. I want the back of the plant, again, up against or in contact with the plank the same way it was before. Okay, I'm going to cut this root off. I'm going to place it a little bit more to the side. Can't see what I'm doing here. This one I'm cutting off too. See ya. And so something like that. I'm going to hold this one up against the plank, and then I'm potting this one in the same orientation, just like that. And now I can add the soil in. I will be using a plant support tie so that it remains, or those area roots remain in contact with the back of the board. Okay, I don't want this cutting to fall out because I just put all that soil in. And I don't want those roots to become exposed. So I'm just going to hold it right there. Trying to weave it in between these leaves here so that I'm not squishing the leaf petiole, but just the stem. I can adjust this later if I need as well. Actually, I only need one of these ties. I put two of them together, but I only need one. Okay, so this one's kind of like that, just something temporary like that. And now I can finish adding in the rest of the soil. Okay, here's the finished product. I just gave it some water, I sprayed off the leaves, just cleaned it up a little bit. I think it looks absolutely fantastic. I know it can be pretty frustrating when you have a plant that just doesn't look the way you want it to or expect it to. So I hope these two methods help you care for your plants a little bit more and maybe give you the confidence to chop up your plants. Like I said, they're very resilient. If you have any comments or questions, please leave it down below in the comment section. Check back for some updates down the road. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye.